right. I think we are good to go. Awesome. Again, thank you all so much for joining. I believe this is the last in the series of town halls that the Illinois Environmental Council is doing for like our members and other folks. This is really just a great opportunity for us to talk about, all the things that IEC is working on in all these different spaces. We've already done some on conservation and waste issues and energy and transportation and all these great things we're working on. But not to toot my own horn or anything, but I think we're saving the best for last. Agriculture and food systems. This is a really exciting, yeah, Liz, toot toot, I agree. This is a really exciting time. There's been some really cool movement in the space the last few years. Oh, Lindsay, thumbs down. But you know, with the advent of COVID and everything, I think there's really been an increased public awareness of issues surrounding the whole agricultural system, whether it's, equity issues with access, where our food is coming from, how it's being made, who's making it, all these different things. And it goes from all the way from rural Illinois with corn and soybean production and nutrient loss, all the way up to the way that workers are treated that are part of, the general food system. And then, overall, the entire impact on our environment. There are so many different facets of this agricultural work that I just love being involved in. And they touch so many different things from, just public health to environmental health and a lot of stuff in between. So this is really exciting time for us. And I'm really excited to share the presenters that we're going to have tonight. Just as kind of a reminder to everybody, the way that we'll do this, we've got three presenters. We're going to be touching on three different subjects. So we've got nutrient loss reduction. We're going to be talking about the good food purchasing policy, which I will have explained if you've not heard of that before. And then the issues around pesticide use in Illinois and herbicides and how those impact the environment. As we go through this, I would ask folks that if you have questions for presenters, which I definitely encourage you to have, if you have something, I want you to put it in the chat or just, write it down, have it ready, because the way we intend on doing this is once we get through all of our presenters, we will open it up and have you all have the opportunity to ask questions of us and just, anything, just basic stuff all the way to, in the weeds, how something is going to work. We want to be open with you all about these initiatives and everything. And this is a great just learning opportunity. And I think it's a great way to just gin up excitement about what is coming down. With that, I will turn it over to our first presenter, the executive director of the Chicago Food Policy Action Council, Roger Cooley, who is going to be speaking to us about the good food purchasing policy. So, Roger, I'll hand it over to you, and I will start your slideshow whenever you're ready.
Great, thanks, Eliot. Excited to be here tonight. Yeah, so I'm going to give some background on the good food purchasing policy, which we've been working on since 2015. We're with a large coalition, some of the partners here. We're able to get the city of Chicago and Cook County to adopt it in 2017 and 2018. And so building off of the success there, really looking at what it would look like for the state of Illinois to adopt it for its institutions as well. Ellie, if you want to start with the slideshow, we can get going. So at the Chicago Food Policy Action Council, we focus on building and advocating for, with many partners and community members, a more equitable, sustainable, and just food system. And we see the good food purchasing policy as a way to tie together many parts of the food system, and while thinking about sustainable local supply, but really also focused on folks who are receiving the food in the institutions, but also looking holistically at the whole supply chain and using it as a lever to influence different aspects of the supply chain coming into the food system, into our public institutions as well, and really seeing as an opportunity to leverage the dollars that are going to be spent, that are spent every day feeding our kids, folks, seniors, students, folks in hospitals, folks in correction system, that this is a real opportunity to be able to get as many benefits as possible. So we can move on. So really focusing on ensuring that, again, that the places feeding our communities purchase and serve food that advance good food for all. And so some of the values that come out and are really emphasized in the Good Food Purchasing Program: accessibility, equitability, including racial equity, and then really looking at healthy food that's produced fairly, that comes from our local producers and processors, that's humanely raised, and is environmentally sustainable. Move on, Eliot. So the Good Food Purchasing Policy was developed originally, a program was originally developed in Los Angeles by their Food Policy Council in the around 2010. And they were really looking at a holistic way of how to look at holding all those different values of local, community-based economics, focused on nutrition, community health, valued workforce, animal welfare, and environmental sustainability. And out of the early success that happened in Los Angeles, the Center for Good Food Purchasing spun out, who helped to provide a lot of accountability and transparency in the program as well. Let's move on. So again, really emphasizing these 5 value categories, and the institutions that then who adopt this policy are starting to do an analysis of all the food that comes into them that they purchase through these different 5 value categories. We can move on. So you can kind of see where it's being implemented or in the process of being implemented across the country. Right now, it covers over $1 billion in food spend across all the different institutions in these different cities who have adopted it. Really seeing that as more institutions adopt it, it starts reforming the food chain. The suppliers start knowing that if they're going to have to be advantaged to be able to participate in different institutional value chains, they need to start following these different criteria and purchasing from producers who follow these values as well. Let's move on. So the center, so part of the process, and this is what state institutions would work towards getting to, they submit all of their food data, which includes who they, what they bought, the price they bought it at, the quantity they bought it at, who they bought it from, and ideally down from the food, from including suppliers and processors all the way down to the farm level. So in each of the 5 value categories, they get a rating system. And then based on the amount and certain criteria in each of the categories, they score a certain number of points. And so as the total comes in, then they start getting a baseline score in each one of the different categories. So part of the process isn't coming up with a target number that's not based in reality. Each institution gets a baseline score that says, okay, here's where you're at now when the policy is adopted. And then over time, you can make progress. So it doesn't provide a cost burden on any institution just to get started in the program. Let's move forward, Eliot. So these are all the departments and agencies in Cook County and the city who, in some form or another, are touched by the policy. And some, like the school district, the park district, and family and support services, primarily senior meals, are farthest along in adopting. Some of the others have really looked at touching it in different ways, some in concession environments, and maybe look more like a pledge, but they're all in some way engaging on this and they also are separate task forces within the city and county who are collaboratively working on the adoption of all the programs as well. If we can move on. And so we also have a large ecosystem of partners who are working on adopting it, who represent each of the 5 different sectors of the value categories. So really seeing an opportunity for one, being able to build a large coalition who can help advocate for the policy at the state level, but also who are going to receive direct benefits from as the value chain shifts for their work on the ground and their different constituencies as well. Move on. So we'll be working on adopting it at the state level this year. Just wanted to show some of the programming that we've attached to this. We've also, to help increase access for smaller producers, we do buyer supplier mixers. Our next one is in the city at Malcolm X College on December 12th from 1 to 7. I'll put this in the chat as an opportunity for folks to participate. But, really seeing some of the work is connecting smaller vendors, processors, into the opportunity. So really bringing also the buyers and procurement officers into the room so we can make these connections down the road. So people can really take advantage of this opportunity, and not only being existing current suppliers, but really being able to grow the supply chain to support local producers. And also seeing this as an opportunity for folks who are familiar, the local food purchasing agreement that the state just closed the RFP on, which is going to be purchasing primarily produce, but also meat, proteins, from primarily socially disadvantaged producers, and redistributing that through food banks and other food assistance programs. That program's, we've got about $20 million flowing in it through the next 2 years. We're really seeing the state and other localities adopting more local purchasing as a bridge opportunity and long-term sustainable, hopefully income driver for producers as well. But I'll stop there and hand it off.
Thanks so much, Roger. I think this is a very kind of exciting project that we're going to be kind of endeavoring on coming up. And I mean, one question I had immediately, Roger, I mean, it's my understanding, I mean, Illinois would be the first state that has actually gotten their own institutions to do this in the country, right?
Yeah, following this policy for sure. And a lot of states have active farm to school work, and Illinois does as well, but really kind of setting the full range of the standards. Illinois would be the first state to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's cool. I mean, it's such like a multifaceted kind of approach to how we can start changing our food system and stuff. And I am personally excited about it just because I live, downstate, like fairly rural Illinois. You can see where there was a lot of food infrastructure down here at one point that was feeding people locally. And I would hope that this policy, if it, hopefully does move forward here before too long, that, it really starts, beefing up those areas again, right? Because I mean, it's all going to play into this, including like local economics and all those kind of great things.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things really being able to advocate around. And again, also the ability to link a lot of issues that, it's not just the producers who are getting better food into the system and improving their, hopefully having longer term income opportunities and secure income opportunities, but also the quality of food that's being served to, a lot of the vulnerable populations through the food systems. Because again, it's schools, hospitals, seniors who are the primary recipients of congregate feeding. And it's and a lot of that's coming from federal and state dollars who are providing that money as well. So much.
Yeah, and I would certainly hope too, as a byproduct of this, that public schools also start looking at this as well, because I think that there's been some weird, it's kind of scary articles recently about what our kids have been fed. I remember what happened in Peoria last year, and kids are eating some weird stuff. I'll say that. It'd be great if they could start eating some stuff that's a little bit healthier and sourced locally, which would be great.
Yeah, hopefully feeding our kids more of a race to the top than the race to the bottom.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Roger, thank you so much. Definitely appreciate you being here. For all of those that are like on this call, this is going to be a really big campaign next year. So if you want to get involved, we'll have more follow up after this, but we will definitely be connecting the dots to go to the Capitol and make sure our legislature actually starts taking this seriously. So again, thank you, Roger. Really appreciate you being here. With that, I think we will go to our next presenter. I think, Kim, is it okay if I put you on the spot next?
Sure.
Awesome. Kim is with Prairie Rivers Network. And unfortunately, Kim, I forget your title right now. Would you remind me really quick?
Yeah, Director of Ecological Health.
Director of Ecological Health. Kim and I have been talking for a long time for the last few years about the role of pesticide and herbicide use in agriculture in Illinois. And with Illinois being over 70% working lands, it is something that people should be paying a lot of attention to. Not to give too much away, but this is a very important issue that has not had a lot of legislative movement in the past because the agricultural industry is, a big, powerful thing in the capital. But I think we are building something that is going to be formidable down the line, and I'm excited to have all you hear about it. So, Kim, I will hand it over to you. I will make you a co-host so you can do the sharing and stuff. But I think you're good to go.
All right. Can you all see my screen?
Yep, we got
Okay.
you.
Great. So let me start off by saying that there's a lot of issues, as Eliot was saying, that we've been kind of working on regarding pesticides over the past few years, but I'm going to just touch on a couple today. And, as we all know, and this is just some background here at first, that, pesticides are all over in the environment. They can move through the environment in our air, our water, dust, through the soil. And we use them in things like chemical long treatment practices, mosquito control, commercial and residential pest control, invasive species control, insect and weed pest management and agricultural systems. And that last one's really important because 75% approximately, or 27 million acres of our land is in agriculture in Illinois. And I think over the years, Eliot, we've probably worked on at least one piece of policy on all of these.
I think that's very true.
So today I'm going to just talk about two of the key issues. And the first one is unused treated seed and ethanol production. And the second one is going to be herbicide drift. And to talk about treated seeds, the majority of our seeds in agriculture right now that we use particularly for corn and a little less so of soy, but certainly other crops, they're treated with fungicides, insecticides. Typically these pesticides are water soluble, so they can move through the plant tissue, but that also makes them, easily, they can easily contaminate our water resources. And unfortunately, most of our treated seeds are exempt from the FIFRA, which is the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, which is our large overarching piece of federal legislation that oversees pesticide use in the US. And just like treated lumber, treated seeds are exempt from much of the regulations. So neonics are really the main concern with these treated seeds. Many of you know about them. Like I said, they're systemic. They go through the roots, the tissue, the nectar, and the pollen. They are highly toxic to invertebrates, especially bees. They are widely used in tens of millions of acres annually. And they're also one of the leading contaminants for aquatic systems, and they're highly toxic to many species of aquatic life. And unfortunately, they can be really persistent. So for example, a single application can be persistent in soil for months or years. And residues have been found in woody plants for up to 6 years after a soil drench application. So it just stays in that plant for a very long time. And the reason that we're concerned about this is that there was a catastrophe, really an environmental and human health catastrophe in Nebraska back in 2021 with the Alt-N ethanol plant, where they were receiving stockpiles of unused treated seed, and they were using it for ethanol production. And the byproducts and the storage of these unused treated seeds created a really enormous environmental disaster with water pollution, air pollution. People were getting sick, bee colonies were dying off, livestock was getting sick and dying. And as a result, the town and the surrounding residents of Mead, Nebraska now have legacy contamination to deal with that's going to take decades to clean up. And so we want to ensure that this does not happen in Illinois. We currently do not use treated seeds in the production of ethanol, but we want to ensure that that never happens. The second topic I wanted to talk about was herbicide drift injuries. And many of you have probably known that in the past 8 or so years, there's been increased reports of injuries to row crops, specialty crops like tomatoes, peaches, and apples, as well as injuries to wild and cultivated plants across the state and across the Midwest. And this is largely due to 2 types of movement. One is pesticide drift, which is particle drift. And I've got a handy little video here, which just shows particle drift happens at the time of application. Those little particles of herbicide are blown, or any pesticide, are blown off site during application, where they harm non-target plants, animals, wildlife, people, etc. And then we also have vapor drift, which has become more of a problem lately, where herbicides are applied and anywhere from 1 day to even up to 7 days later, those herbicides or pesticides vaporize into the atmosphere, essentially evaporate, are carried with the prevailing winds, sometimes really long distances, and then they fall out and injure non-target broadleaf plants. So, we all have heard about the crops being injured and, from dicamba, and how big of a problem that has been over the past several years. Well, it doesn't just stop at crops. We've really done a lot of monitoring and documenting of injuries on nature preserves, private property, public parks, schoolyards, as well as, private gardens and farmers' properties and crops. And this here is a picture of Noblock Woods Nature Preserve. It's a white oak. We visited this place every year for the past 6 years. You can see that these leaves are curled, they're cupped. These leaves are not able to function like they should. They don't have the surface area that they need to photosynthesize and make food. These trees get stressed when they're like this. And it really impacts the health and their ability to produce acorns and fruit. Here's another example. This is Marissa Woods Nature Preserve. It's a post oak. Again, these leaves are small, they're curled, they're cupped, their surface area is reduced. This tree, its branches are dying back. It's under a tremendous amount of stress. The canopy is thinner. And, we've been looking at and monitoring properties and nature preserves for 6 years. This coming year, 2024, will be our 7th year. And, Eastern redbud is a really common tree. We've got it everywhere. It's kind of the canary in the coal mine. It's very easy to notice symptoms on it. And just about everywhere we go, we see symptoms of injury on Eastern redbud. Unfortunately, we also monitor a lot of symptomatic oaks. And, this is really important because they're keystone species in Illinois. They're important for climate change, mitigating climate change. They're, host to hundreds of species of moths and butterflies. And those are critical food. They're larval, and the adult forms of those are critical food for migratory birds. So there's a lot of potential impacts here that can ripple through ecosystems when you look at impacting forest health, particularly with our oaks. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of the background on the ecological impacts. I'm not going to list all of these, but we know that flowering plants often produce fewer flowers if they're exposed to some of these herbicides like 2,4-D and dicamba. Those flowers are visited less frequently by pollinators, so that can impact the plant pollinator network. And we also know that severe and repeated exposures are causing declines in tree and plant health. And this can lead to eventual death of the plants or trees. as well as these shifts in food and habitat quality and resources will lead to shifts in animal behavior. So changes in nesting, changes in foraging behaviors, changes in pollination, and as well as increased risk of harm by having to travel potentially longer for food resources. This is an amazing tree in Washington County. It's our state record post oak. We've been looking at this tree since 2017. This picture was taken in 2022, and I can tell you that in 2017, its canopy was not see-through like this. I visited it this year about 2 months ago, and it looks even worse than it does in this photo. This tree is under stress. It has had symptoms of injury. Ever since we started monitoring it, we've taken multiple tissue samples from this tree every year, anywhere from 2 to 4 years apart. 2 to 4 weeks apart. And the majority of the samples have come back with residues of 2,4-D, dicamba, atrazine. And this tree is in a 40-acre pasture. And the landowners have been having to cut down trees that have been dying in this pasture. And this is one of the neighboring trees. This is another post oak, and it's very stressed. All of the leaves are on the main branches. That's kind of its last ditch effort to create food. It's called epicormic branching, and you'll see a lot of these dead branches on the tree as well. So, this year we know this is hitting crops. We know it's harming specialty growers. We know that it's impacting our nature preserves, but we also wanted to highlight that it's in urban areas as well. And so we did a study in Champaign-Urbana. We collected leaves from 13 different locations throughout the community, on the periphery and in the center of town. We focused on public areas, residences, and places that were on or near schools. These samples were taken on areas that we know do not use chemical lawn treatments or that showed no evidence of chemical use. And every sample had detectable levels of 1 or more herbicides in it. So this just kind of goes to highlight that these chemicals are moving long distances, and these were agricultural chemicals. They weren't, some of them were dicamba and 2,4-D, which are widely used in lawn care, but there were other herbicides that are only used in agricultural practices that were showing up in these locations as well. So just in summary, these injuries are widespread. They're on crops, yards, protected lands, sometimes throughout entire communities. You can see symptoms. We're seeing exposures happen multiple times a year. And many of these locations have injuries year after year. And we're really starting to see alarming declines in some species, especially oaks, in many areas across the state. So I mentioned that we have FIFRA, which is that overarching piece of federal legislation. We also have, of course, the Illinois Pesticide Act, which is administered by IDOA. And it's the principal statute that regulates the labeling, distribution, use, and application and disposal of pesticides in Illinois. And then we also have the Natural Areas Preservation Act, which established the INPC and charges DNR and INPC, the Nature Preserves Commission, with the responsibility of protecting natural lands and waters. So we have these 3 pieces of legislation that we can use to, garner ideas and brainstorm about what potential solutions there may be out there. One of them, which we've been putting out there for several years, and Eliot's really taken the lead on that, is this banning the use of treated seeds for ethanol production. There is, like I said, we're not doing it now, but there is no reason that we should ever do it in Illinois, and we should have a law that prevents it. There's also options to strengthen the Illinois Pesticide Act. There's many of them fines and penalties that could be made more severe and be more meaningful. We can also add special protections or application requirements for pesticide applications near nature preserves, land and water reserves, publicly funded lands, schools, and daycares. We can also strengthen the enforcement of the Illinois Pesticide Act. Enforcement has always been a really big problem, and it can certainly be better than it is. There's also the potential to change what types of herbicides can be sold or used in Illinois. And I guess we could say pesticides too, to include fungicides and insecticides, but really the herbicides, I think there's potential. We have some formulations that are less likely to volatilize and move off site after they're applied, and some that are more volatile. And so there's some options there. And then, a really important thing for us to consider and to look into is increasing the communication between applicators that are applying near neighborhoods, near schools, near specialty crops or nature preserves, and perhaps having some kind of, mandatory notice prior to application, because there have been instances where, a preschool has had to take children indoors, at a moment's notice because there's drift in the air, and it's not as uncommon as we might think. And so having some type of advance notice, particularly around schools or protected areas, might be a solution as well. And that's all I have right now, Eliot.
That is great, Kim. Thank you so much. Well, not great. That's it's a pretty kind of dire situation in a lot of ways. I do think that this is, one of those issues that, the impacts of agriculture, which is our state's main, economic driver, on just, the natural world we live in and public health. It's something, like Kim said, like the ethanol seed bill, for example, is something we've been fighting hard for a few years now. And I will say, luckily, that we did manage to get that bill out of the House this last year under the sponsorship of Representative Will Guzzardi. He's been a champion for us on this, and we were excited to finally see it get out of the bigger chamber. Right now, it's sitting over in the Senate, and we will be making a push to finally get it to the governor's office this year. Definitely would not be surprised, or you all should not be surprised if you see emails from me asking for witness slips or all those kind of fun things as we bring that back up in January, February of this coming year. It's, somebody that grew up, hunting and fishing with my dad and those kind of things. And I think about all of the places that we used to hunt, a lot of which were state parks that are immediately adjacent to very large agricultural, acres. And, I think that's one of those things that we have a responsibility as a state to think about how this is impacting not just state-owned property, but also private property as well. Kim, I don't know if you've got any words of wisdom for us as well coming out of this. I know this is a huge passion of yours and something that we want to keep, pushing.
Yeah, I mean, it is a huge passion of mine and of many other people. We have a coalition of folks that are really concerned about this issue, whether it's being able to grow their own food in their backyard gardens or, ensure that they have, city parks that are healthy, that they can take their kids and play in. And so I think we just have to build power, and we have to be afraid not to have these conversations that we know we're going to get a lot of pushback on, and use sound science to make our case. And the evidence that's being gathered, not only by us, but by, other institutions like the Natural History Survey and the Nature Preserves Commission and DNR.
Yep. Yeah. It's like I said, it's a sad situation, but as you said, the amount of research that's been done recently, I think, is giving us a lot of good evidence to make the case for legislators that things need to change. So
yeah,
Kim, thank you for all the work you and PRN have done. That's great.
Thanks, Eliot.
Good deal. Well, our next and final presenter of the night is Dylan Cook with American Farmland Trust, and he's going to be talking to us about another big environmental issue in the agricultural sector. Much of which is dealing with our water throughout the state, and honestly throughout the entire Mississippi River watershed. So, Dylan, I will let me make sure you've got sharing capabilities really quick. All right, I think you're good to go. Dylan, you're muffled a little bit.
Can you see a screen, hear me?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you fine. Not seeing a screen yet. Oh, there we go. It's coming up.
Come up there?
Yep, we're good.
All right. Am I presenting to you now?
Yep, you're in presenter mode. You're good to go.
Great. Thanks, Eliot. Again, my name is Dylan Cook, the Midwest Policy Manager for American Farmland Trust. Happy to join the conversation tonight. Here to give an update on another big issue in agriculture in Illinois. That's the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy. Timely update because the 2023 biennial report looks like it will be released this Friday. I know that many of you on the call are familiar with the strategy, and I think a lot of you who've joined tonight know a lot more about the topic than I do, but it's a recording. We're going to share it around with other folks. So been asked for some quick background on the topic, an introduction to the strategy, why it was developed, and why it's important. So quickly, nutrient pollution is generally caused by excess nitrogen and phosphorus from sources like wastewater treatment effluent, agricultural runoff, livestock waste, and urban stormwater. And it is, like Eliot mentioned, it's the biggest water quality issue in Illinois and around the Midwest, the Mississippi main stem states. Waterways in Illinois contribute a significant percentage of the nitrate, nitrogen, and total phosphorus that reach the Gulf of Mexico hypoxic zone through the Mississippi River. And that dead zone where oxygen is depleted makes it impossible for plants and animals to survive, hurts fisheries habitat and recreational opportunities. And here closer to home, excess nutrients can impair drinking water quality, harm our aquatic life, and limit recreational opportunities around the state. So in response to the situation, the US EPA created the Gulf Hypoxia Action Plan in 2008. And that began to coordinate the efforts all along the Mississippi River, 12 states, to begin to develop these nutrient reduction strategies. And in Illinois, that became formal in 2015. And the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy was first formalized. And it's essentially an effort to improve water quality in Illinois to reduce our contributions to the dead zone. And here in Illinois, it's coordinated by IDOA, EPA, the University of Illinois Extension, and those agency and folks, they collaborate with a number of committees, nonprofit groups, and stakeholders throughout the state to keep tabs on and kind of regularly update where we're at in the strategy and in the process. So the nutrient loss reduction strategy's long-term objective is a 45% reduction of both total phosphorus and nitrate nitrogen loads leaving Illinois. And that's by 2035. The interim targets are a 15% decrease in nitrogen and a 25% decrease in total phosphorus by 2025, which is just a couple of years away. Those reduction percentages are calculated against a baseline period of 1980 to 1996. And so like the graphs here They're from the original strategy in 2015, showing the relative percentages of where nutrients were coming from at the time, and just how many respective pounds of nitrate, nitrogen, and phosphorus reductions we were going to need to meet these goals. This shows, sources of nutrients. They're generally broken into three categories. There's urban stormwater, point source, and non-point source. Urban stormwater is a pretty straightforward descriptor, but for clarity's sake, generally when the strategy speaks of point sources, it is referring to easily identifiable locations where treated wastewater is discharged from a municipal wastewater plant or an industrial facility. And the third main source is agriculture, or sometimes called non-point source. We're generally referred to as agriculture. And it's so called because there is no one readily identifiable point where nutrients are entering the waterways. Essentially, there's no single pipe that's discharging into a river or a stream. And so as you can see in 2015, about 18% of the nitrate nitrogen was coming from point sources, 80% was attributed to agriculture, and the remaining came from urban stormwater. For phosphorus, point source and non-point source contributions were equal at 48% each, and about 4% of total phosphorus was coming from urban runoff. And this was at the outset of the strategy back in 2015. And so after that original strategy document was published, it brings us to the biennial updates. These are just big, expansive publications coordinated by the U of I Extension, and it's just the state of the strategy. They include science and methodology updates, partner efforts, information on research initiatives, detailed accounting of stakeholder activities, and so much more. I think it's important to note that the water quality data presented in them lags the real world by about 2 years, which gives the science committee time to review and compile the information. So when we look at a 2021 update, for example, it provides water quality information through 2019. The 2019 report shows data through 2017, etc. So for clarity, when we look at a 2023 update that we're going to get this week, it is for water year of 2021. And this is the status of our 2023 update in one chart. It shows that through the 2021 water year, which is a running average, that's why you see 2017 to 21, they average that 5-year period so as not to be too spiky. But you can see that nitrate N loads increased by 4.8%. Total phosphorus loads increased by 35%, and water yield, which is a really important factor in all this, increased by 23%. And statewide, it's important to note a couple of things. One is that point sources have done a pretty remarkable job in meeting their goals. They have reduced total phosphorus losses by 34%. And then also the nitrate and nitrogen and the total phosphorus loads have been highly correlated with that bottom number, the water yield, which is itself correlated with precipitation. Essentially, greater runoff and drainage associated with climate change tend to increase our river loading. And what this means is that even as farmers are changing their practices to support the nutrient loss reduction strategy, doing things like adopting conservation cropping rotations, no-till methods, or cover crops, the major rainfall events we are seeing due to climate change are making it harder and harder for them to keep nutrients in the field for their crops. It makes it all the more important for water quality stakeholders, all of us here in Illinois, that we continue to advocate for policies and practices which create healthy soils, which can hold more water and more nutrients, and policies that support farmers as they transition to more environmentally sound practices. Um, and even though we're just a couple of years away from the 2025 interim targets, there is some good news in the efforts that are underway. And I think IEC and a lot of stakeholders on this call have had a big role in getting them off the ground. So the first one that I mention is SB 1701. I think it was the Partners for Conservation Reauthorization Act, really kind of awkward name, but it passed this year, and it came after a number of years of negotiations with stakeholders around the state, folks on this call, IEC and Stewardship Alliance and others, and buy-in from a lot of partners. And it didn't contain everything, the full wish list that was included in earlier versions, but it did create a more robust definition of soil health for Illinois, and it helps to guide the state's efforts by creating the Healthy Soils Initiative. And the Healthy Soils Initiative, it essentially provides guidelines and guidance to soil and water conservation districts around the state, that establishes regular, measurable, cost-effective, and technically achievable goals to advance voluntary incentive-based strategies, strategies that can improve healthy soil and support our water quality goals. A great thing about this bill is that once it passed, IDOA moved really quickly, and they partnered with another homegrown initiative, the picture there, STAR, or Saving Tomorrow's Agricultural Resources, to implement the bill. STAR was developed by the Champaign County Soil and Water Conservation District as a means to contribute to the nutrient loss reduction strategy. It's a free tool that assists farm operators and landowners in evaluating their nutrient and soil loss management practices on individual fields. And now that the program is officially adopted statewide as a result of 1701, it will help reduce the nutrient and soil losses from farmland over larger areas and specific watersheds. And it's a great way to engage really important stakeholders from all corners of the agriculture sector: retail groups, commodity groups, agency folks, and farmers. The next bright spot is the fall covers for spring savings program, which again, many of you on the call have been really instrumental in getting off the ground. It's a simple program run by IDOA, which offers farmers a $5 an acre discount on their crop insurance when they plant cover crops. And as you can see, over the last few years, the program has grown from 50,000 acres to 160,000 acres. And the environmental benefits have really stacked up. Cover crops, they help absorb excess nutrients, hold soil in place, and protect it from big rainfall events. They also help, soils sequester carbon, which make them a fantastic natural and working land climate solution as well. AFT calculates the outcomes of the program each year, and we passed a really cool milestone in 2023. As of this year, the program has kept a cumulative 1 million pounds of nitrogen and more than 100,000 pounds of phosphorus out of Illinois' waterways. Continuing with the cover crop premium discount in 2020 and 2021 and 2022, during the pandemic, building off of the idea of Illinois' success with fall covers for spring savings and other state programs like it. Iowa has a program, Indiana, Wisconsin all have programs. The USDA offered the pandemic cover crop program to states around the country. And when the funding was made available here in Illinois to augment our state program, farmers stepped up and planted about 500,000 acres of cover crops each year. That resulted in an additional 1.5 million pounds of nitrogen reductions and nearly 150,000 pounds of phosphorus reductions just in commodity year 22 itself. And the environmental outcomes and success of this program in recent years, they'll be mentioned in the 2023 biennial report, like the mechanics of them. But I apologize. I shouldn't say the environmental outcomes. They're not going to be included because of that lag in reporting. The 22 acres are not going to be included. So the water quality impacts of all of these extra cover crop acres won't be reflected in those full numbers. It's just important to note that fall covers for spring savings and augmented programs like the pandemic cover crop program, because of the environmental outcomes and the voluntary incentive-based structure of the program, it creates really strong buy-in from farmers, commodity groups, environmental organizations, and agency folks, and shows that smart policy and good advocacy can create really strong partnerships that will help us reach water quality goals. And just the last item I'll note as we look towards meeting those ultimate 2035 target reductions and water quality goals in Illinois is the potential of the Inflation Reduction Act funding. And the simple truth is that conservation programs, I'll rattle off a bunch of acronyms, but EQIP and CSP and RCPP, all of these programs which support water quality outcomes on working lands, and which the nutrient loss reduction strategy relies on for non-point source reductions, they've just been woefully underfunded and backlogged for years. Farmers haven't had access to the technical assistance and financial assistance they needed to employ the practices on their farms. But it changed in 2022 with passage of the IRA, and it's already changing the dynamic for non-point source practices in the state. We've got a lot of work to do to leverage these funds, but there's a number of initiatives already underway at IDOA and at partner organizations around the state, including a separate effort to hire more than 40 conservation planners for Illinois to help move these practices through. So I think that's the last that I've got, just to say, NLRS report update is not what we hoped for, showing an increase, and there's a lot of work to be done, but I think it's helpful to keep in mind that, we've got 12 years before the ultimate goal of 45% reduction in 2035. And there's just a lot of innovative efforts underway. There's new projects starting all the time, and there's just a ton of new funding that will help us get there. That is all I got.
Awesome. Thank you, Dylan. That's really, really, really informative. I mean, the NLRS and our efforts to do this with all of our partners have been a very monumental effort in a lot of ways over the last few years. Before we really started collaborating with everybody on this, we weren't seeing huge dents in state policies regarding nutrient loss reduction. And it's, as Dylan said, I think a testament to what can happen when you bring together maybe non-traditional partners, is kind of a phrase I threw out there sometimes, environmental groups and commodity groups and just state agencies together to come up with some really innovative solutions. It's very cool. And Dylan, for the fall covers program, it's kind of the intent and at least the hope of American Farmland Trust and our partners that we want to increase the amount of money in that fund to expand it, correct?
Yeah, I think that when the funding was available through the pandemic cover crop program, it showed that we had strong demand in the state for the program, for the concept, and at least to the 500,000 acre number. And so AFT, and we're hoping other partners the same, would like to see us get to 500,000 acre floor for the program, just so we can meet farmers and their desire to implement these practices on their farms.
Yeah, and I think another kind of related to that, it's sort of a cool anecdote. I mean, this program now has been around for, was it 3 or 4 years, something like that?
Yeah, 2020 was the first year.
2020. And, I think the first year that they opened up the application online for this for farmers, I think pretty much all of it was gone within about 24 hours, if I remember correctly. And then in, most recent years, it's gone within minutes of going online. And I think it really does show the willingness of farmers to adopt practices that they hadn't before. And, recognizing too that I think farmers throughout Illinois are starting to see the impacts of a changing climate on their operations. As Dylan pointed out, increased instances of rainfall in recent years, I think, has really woken up a lot of people to the fact that, just because you've been doing it the same way and maybe your father and your grandfather did it the same way, that it doesn't hurt to start thinking about maybe changing how you were doing things. I know it can be kind of a scary conversation for folks, but it's important. And I think these voluntary programs are a great way to get farmers involved without, the threat of some kind of regulatory system on them, which is something that I think ultimately we all want to avoid. We want to, work within an agricultural system that's supporting these folks and not punishing them. So that's exciting stuff. Thank you again, Dylan, for presenting on that. That's great data. With that Dylan was our last presenter. I appreciate all of our presenters for talking on all these different topics. These are just hugely important things for, the environmental future in Illinois, and just the surrounding region and country. So I'm excited to see where all this is going. With that, I would love to open it up to folks. If you have questions for our presenters or for IEC, we've got a lot of really smart folks in the room right now. And this is a great time to maybe ask some questions, even simple stuff or more complicated, whatever you've got. So I'll open it up if folks want to raise their hand or just come off mute. I'll turn it over to you all. Oh, come on. There's got to be one person out there that's got something.
I'll ask a question.
Thanks, Jamie.
Hi, I'm Jamie. Just curious, I thank you, Kim, for your presentation about the herbicide drift and the impacts of that. And I guess my question is about just kind of inspiring change in that area. Based on what you presented, you focused a lot on the impact of the drifts on the environment, like what happens to trees, what happens to the plant life, and then ultimately the wildlife around it. But I don't know, my thoughts are like, I feel like people will respond more if they understand the impacts on them. And so when it comes to trying to inspire people to make these changes, I guess, like, how are you presenting it in a way that makes people identify with like what the impact is going to be on them, like their health? I know you mentioned briefly that there was a school that, when they realized that there was drift in the air, they had to move the kids inside. And so, like, are you also educating people on the health risks and, what happens to human beings when these things are present in the air? Because I feel like that's where people will probably just listen a little more and get more motivated.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Jamie. And, when we go out and monitor, I can't think of a single time that a landowner or an individual that hasn't, been around that's asked, what does this mean for me and my health? My kids are out here. What does that mean for them? And, we're a conservation organization. We certainly do have a lot of concerns about the human health aspect, but, with any kind of environmental issue and human health, it takes a lot to tease that out, to say what a specific cause and effect is going to be on your body. And so we've really kind of gone at this of, this is impacting our trees. This is a social justice thing. Everybody deserves the right to have, trees in a healthy environment and have their kids play in these yards. And we do know that there are some human health impacts from the use of these chemicals. That's been well documented. But to extrapolate what that means for an individual in terms of the amount that they're receiving in drift is highly variable.
Mhm.
And but everybody loves trees and we all need them and we all need wildlife. So that's the approach that we are taking from this, but we certainly hope to bring in more of the human health aspect with partners that, that is their forte.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I would add too that there has been a lot more talk recently, especially and Kim had shown this in about one of her slides, but around mosquito abatement, which is a big deal, especially up in suburban areas around Chicago, where there's West Nile virus, these things. So they're trying to control that public health side of these communicable diseases and these kind of things that are out there, mosquito populations. But at the same time, one of the main chemicals that they do use for mosquito abatement is a pyrethroid as a type of insecticide. We know for a fact that has adverse effects on developing child's brains and pregnant women as well. And we have been trying to do a little bit more messaging on that around the Capitol. And it does, I think, catch people's attention when you start talking about like children and those kind of things. So Jamie, to your point, yeah, I think that's one of the things that we do continue to think about when we're messaging around this, because the environmental impacts are very important to our community, but realizing what the public health impacts are as well is really something important that we should continue to explore, I think.
Yeah, and I also think that when it comes to lawn care and treatment of school grounds and playgrounds and things like that for weed control, that is as a very easy fix for individuals and communities to do. And it is certainly an important discussion for us to start having, particularly when we have more and more encroachment on agricultural lands as these cities expand, and that interface with ag and residential is more common and you have more exposure there. So I think those conversations are going to be more and more important as we go on.
Yeah, and Kim, I think related to that too, I see Cindy put in the chat about the impacts on like neighbors losing their gardens and food supplies and those kind of things, which I think we've seen an uptick in recent years as well.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of people upset that they're having a hard time just growing their own vegetables in their backyards.
Yeah, and one of the bigger things I've seen too, even in like the legislature, there's been some very, very conservative lawmakers recently that have put in some bills around reporting requirements on spraying when they're coming within certain proximities to like bee populations for people that are actually making honey and these kind of things, because there's been some incidents, especially downstate Illinois, where people are making this honey for their livelihood as part of like their farm operation, and they've seen entire colonies die off as a result of drift from other fields. And it's been interesting to see the political dynamic on that side of it change, because it definitely hits different for some lawmakers when there's a huge economic impact of like a drift. So those are the other kind of things that I'm interested in exploring as well with messaging around these issues, because
yeah, and landowners are spending thousands of dollars to take a single tree down.
Yeah, and it's I do think it highlights a lot of these issues. It depends on who you're talking to, right? How we message these things, and the more info we continue to gather from folks across all these different sectors, whether it's public health or environment or economic sectors, that are going to help strengthen our arguments. Cynthia, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that humans we're a part of nature, so there's not really a separation, and so many of these issues are affecting our water, some of the we can't see them necessarily, but they're pervasive and ubiquitous throughout our society. And so whether it affects our pollinators, our food systems, it's all very much connected. So it's not that it's if our trees are dying, then we're losing oxygen, and we're losing a lot of the livelihood and the the work that people do to protect natural areas. So as a coalition of conservation organizations, Prairie State Conservation Coalition, we have a lot of people who work really hard to protect these lands for wildlife and human health. And the very things that they're protecting are dying. I mean, it seems like a really critical, if not an emergency. So both the nutrient loss and the herbicide and pesticides, it just feels like poison to me that's running throughout and within our earth, and we're part of that.
Yeah.
Thanks to all the speakers for your excellent work.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely echoing Cynthia. I appreciate those words, Cynthia. Luann, I see you have your hand up.
I do. First, I want to say thank you. I appreciate all of the hard work. There's a quote from Margaret Mead that says, "Never underestimate the power of a small group of people to change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has." So thank you for all the people involved. I have a number of questions. I'll preface it first with, just as far as I can see, the food is kind of the new smoking, except for at a much grander scale in terms of just the impact, whether the poor food, the nutrient poor, calorie dense food that is everywhere, back to what you had said, Eliot, in our schools, some of the food less than what we would give to in our prisons, as well as just the quality of the foods that we're experiencing from, whether it's from the agriculture, from the factory farm side, or from the field side of it. And so much of this keeps coming back to, seems to be part of the factory farming, a lot of the commercial ag, and of course it turns into water quality and air quality and all of these things that we're seeing. So prefacing with that, I have a couple of questions. One, I don't know, who would maybe be the best person, if anyone, for this. I always like to ask, follow the dollar. So how does the funding, let's call it, whether it's Farm Bill at a national level or others, how do these things help drive the behaviors? And do people have any other thoughts about how that might be done differently? Second question would be tied to, similar to that. I don't know if you're familiar with Bob Quinn. He's a farmer, also a PhD out of Montana, who has really faced a lot of these similar challenges and has had solutions. He owns Camut International and looking at ancient grains. And then the third one is HB 4089, which is the House bill that went through, in August of this year, that allows for our communities to go to their schools and say, we want plant-based options, hopefully unprocessed plant-based options. So I'm trying to understand maybe the insights any of you have about how do we help and better support these connections of money, right, to to the directions that we're seeking here. And I'm an elected official in my community, and I'm interested in just kind of getting your perspective. So thank you.
Yeah, that is a range of fantastic questions. To your first one about really the impacts of things like Farm Bill, and you said follow the dollar. I hate to put you on the spot right now, but Chad, are you with us right now? Maybe not, and that's okay. Chad Wallace is our. Oh wait, I see you came off mute. Chad, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
I hate to put you on the spot for a second, but this seems like a tune that we've been singing in the office together a lot about following the dollars. Chad is our rural affairs director here at the Illinois Environmental Council and has been doing some really very eye-opening research on basically the livestock industry in Illinois and how that is run. Chad, do you want to say a couple of words about following the dollar and kind of what we've seen, at least in livestock?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, like you said, it's been eye-opening how this industry actually works, but it's all basically built on control. The farmers are making enough money to keep in business. Not all of them, of course, but as far as the meat industries, it's basically monopolized, which takes the control, the need for markets as far as the prices you can get are all done through contracts. And it basically ends up in the hands of special interest groups is where the dollar ends up. You've got the various things. It's such a broad topic. I think that we could do an entire evening on just this specific portion of it.
Yeah, and I guess that's a good flag too, that we do plan on having a really in-depth lunch and learn series at IEC to talk about the role of the CAFO industry in agriculture, and really, I think more broadly, as Chad said, about the monopolization of agriculture and how that may be the single biggest issue within the agricultural industry right now. It's the reason why institutions like CAFOs exist. It is the reason why you don't see as many small farmers that are selling locally within communities anymore. It's the reason why Illinois is primarily in corn and soybean production and is still importing 95+% of the food that we eat, even though we're 70% ag land. There's a lot of signs pointing to that the industry is very messed up right now.
And it's very evident that it was entirely by design. And when you get to looking at that portion of it, it kind of all makes sense. It goes back to things 30, 40 years ago, they were implementing ideas and policy that enabled today to happen. So
yeah. And I mean, the Farm Bill as an example, Dylan had brought up the EQIP program, which is a great conservation tool, but it has been co-opted in some ways by the livestock industry to help build up CAFOs too. They use it as a way to say that they're managing nutrients and holding all this stuff in place, but ultimately all the nutrients they're creating is, manure that is widespread put on fields throughout Illinois and is ultimately contributing to nutrient loss and a lot of other things. There's a lot of there. I'll say that. Luann, I want to make sure I'm getting your other stuff too. I could stick on that first topic for a long time.
No, thank you. And that actually, Chad's response is exactly what I thought would be the response given on the research that I've done on the topic. We'd love to learn more about that and ways that we can support our lawmakers and ways of giving direction for change, specifics about that. But what Chad said is my understanding.
Yep. Yeah, no, and I think the nutrient loss, pesticide use, all of that is a function of an agricultural system that's broken in a lot of ways. I think we did see this at the beginning of the pandemic as well with food supply chain shortages, especially in meat. And when people realize that the majority of meat production in the United States is controlled by 3 or 4 different companies, which means that if one processing facility goes down, it affects the ability of millions of people to access food. And that is a major problem. And I have to give props to groups like Illinois Stewardship Alliance that are on here and others that have been talking about this for years. But it's, it's something that I think finally people are starting to really take seriously. And I'm personally excited to see where we're going in the future on this, because I think people are really starting to ask, where's my food coming from? What was done to get it here? All those kind of things. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for our presenters, or just want to rant for a second too? This is a great time to actually have a nice environmental therapy session, I think, as well, which is good for everybody, I think. Yeah, Bonnie.
Hi, I have a question about neonicotinoids. I think that's how they're pronounced, or neonics.
Yeah, yeah.
Where are they used exactly? I thought I'd heard they were used on plants and flowers that come from out of state to Illinois, and you buy them at Home Depot and places like that. But are they used beyond that also?
Yeah, Kim, I'll give this one to you.
Okay. Um, yeah, so they're used on seeds. They're also used as a foliar spray on some crops. They are used as a soil drench on trees sometimes to deal with pests, but they also some lawn and home stores have been trying to phase out, just due to consumer demand, the use of the neonics on their plants. But they still are widely used in cultivar varieties and greenhouse plants. You can often ask if the plants that you're buying have been treated with neonicotinoids. And even now, particularly if you buy from a native nursery, they typically do not use them at all on their plants. So I would always ask, but they're even in, private lawn care stuff that you can buy at Lowe's, the stuff that's grub killers and beetle larvae killers. It's nasty stuff. It sticks around for a long time and is non-specific, meaning it hurts a lot of different types of insects, not just, what you see on the picture in the bag.
Well, thank you so much. That's enlightening. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Kim. And I think too, this is one of those things I think is a public education tool as well, especially around pesticide use. Because as you said, if you walked into a Lowe's or Menards or whatever right now, many of the scary chemicals that we talk about and that Kim was mentioning are things that you can just pick up and buy as a consumer. The formulations might be a little bit different, but they're there. And I think just interesting that I hope more people in the public can actually start reading the labels on the things that they're getting and doing a quick Google search, seeing what's out there, because they'll learn a lot quick. Oh, thank you. Sorry, I was commenting. I just want to make sure I'm not missing something. Thanks, Ed. Great. Anybody else have anything they wanted to bring up?
Hey, Eliot, did
Yeah,
you have the other two questions I had? I don't know if maybe there just wasn't any response for them, but the question, if anyone was familiar with Bob Quinn, who authored Grain to Grain, the PhD plant biochemist who is also a farmer out of Montana, who has faced a lot of these similar exact questions. This could be exactly from his talk as well. Or HB 4089, which is the House bill that was recently passed that allows communities to go to their public schools to ask for plant-based options, and how that might connect and support some of the investment in farmers and helping to support them to do the things that we've been talking about. If not, no worries. Just was curious. Thank you.
Yeah, House Bill 4089 was one that we had, I believe, I don't think that we slipped in support of it, but we had seen it, and I'll definitely go back and review that. There was a number of school lunch bills that were actually around this last year. I remember that one. There was another one about more on the kind of the religious option sides with like halal, like foods and these kind of things. That was put forward by Senator Villavolom, I believe. But I will definitely look into that. And to the Bob Quinn name that you mentioned, I had not, but I just did a Google search and I pulled it up. So I will definitely look into that. Oh, and Jacqueline's saying Bob Quinn's going to be here in February, which is cool. I'll definitely look into that. Sounds like something we should be talking to.
Fantastic. Yes, he's an excellent resource for particularly the topics that you've been discussing tonight. So thank you to everybody on this call and all of our experts.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. Cool. I'm not seeing anything else right now. I just want to say, I think we can end a few minutes early. I just want to say thank you to all, especially to our presenters, for talking about these really important topics. This is something that, like, the Environmental Council we're very invested in trying to figure out how to make changes in these systems. I personally, like I said, living down in like a rural part of Illinois, want to see these changes happen around me. And it's something that I really take personally in a lot of ways. And I'm just very grateful to be amongst this community that just, you know, I'll say this, I worked on Senate Republican staff for 4 years before I worked for the Illinois Environmental Council. And this is a wonderfully supportive community compared to that. And I'm just very, very grateful for you all to provide your insights and your passions and all these things. So thank
Hey,
you all so
Eliot?
much for joining. Oh yeah, Luann. Yeah.
Could I ask one last question?
Yeah.
If we have the time and the presenters are open to it, could each presenter say, you know, if I was king or queen for the day, here's the number one thing that I would recommend that you do, or, you know, to help drive change, or, you know, kind of their best nugget of wisdom, of recommendation for those of us on the call of how we can be supportive.
I think that's a wonderful idea. Dylan, if you were, or Kim, I know you have to hop off. Kim, what do you think to
Oh my gosh, that's a terribly hard question.
that?
Oh man, I don't know. There's so many things that if I could change, I would change. But I guess just for all of us, not to give up and not to back down as easily as we might feel we should. You know, I think some of this work can be kind of intimidating at times, but don't give up. Stand up for what we know is right.
Thank you.
For sure. Dylan, did you want to throw your 2 cents in there?
Mine's going to be very boring compared to that positive note, but I mentioned if I could change one thing going into next year, what it'd be, and that's, to get everybody to advocate for cover crops around Illinois. They're a good natural climate solution, good for our waterways, good for our farmers, and it's just something that has broad-based support.
Great. Thanks, Dylan. And I'll say this too, I guess, just to throw in my idea. If I could change everything, it would be that everybody tomorrow would get on the phone with their respected or their elected representative and senator, introduce themselves, and make it known kind of what changes they want to see. Nothing gets to these people more than having constituents contact them. It's something that IEC really tries to drive home with, voters throughout Illinois. And it's one of the most important tools we have is being able to contact our lawmakers and having an open dialogue. Definitely very, very important.
That's terrific. Thank you.
Thanks, Luann. And thanks everybody else here. This was really, really great. Appreciate you all being here. We're going to be uploading this online and sharing links and stuff. So if you have folks that wanted to see this but couldn't make it, or you just want to share it, definitely send out links. We'll have this thing up on YouTube before too long. So with that, I will draw us to a close. Thank you all so much. Appreciate you all being here.
Good job, Eliot. Thanks.
Thanks.